supposed to do at that time. He dwelt there in that lust, and he watched that lady take her bath, and he lusted after her, and he sinned after her, and he went into her, and he went to and brought her into the castle, and he went, and they went together, they come together, and the lust became sin. And when it says that when it happened, all these things, it could have stopped before, but the multitude of David's sin starting to build up, and it come to the point where he ended up, he tried to start to hide his sin. As a Christian today, let me tell you something, if we don't get into sin, we won't try to hide our sin. But when we fall, let me tell you something, I'm not going to stand up here all righteous and say that I'm perfect. If a man of God, if David can get into that situation, I believe any one of us here can get into that situation. We need to have the vision, we need to have the power, and we need to have the multitude of God's tender mercies upon our life to look away from these things and not to succumb to the lust of this world and not to succumb to the lust of the flesh, but to turn and look at the God that gives us those tender mercies and has that loving kindness toward us. The multitude of mercies. Then David had to do, the lady ended up being pregnant, and guess what? Her husband was out to war. Her husband was out fighting the war that David had sent him out to do. And here's David, and he's in a conundrum, whatever it is now. He's in a pickle. As the preacher said earlier, he's in between a rock and a hard spot. He don't know what to do. So now he has to sin some more. He has to start lying to cover up what happened. Then it comes to a point, we won't get into all of it because it's a long story, but David tries to coerce her husband into coming down and to being with his wife again so that they could just smooth everything over. But her husband, being a noble man, said, I cannot go into my wife's house when the other people that I'm with are out fighting the war. I cannot come and do that. So he stayed outside and did not go to his wife. And David had to figure out a way to get out of this sin. Instead of taking it all to the mercies, to the multitude of the mercies of God, he's tried to fix it himself, didn't he? So he come up with a plan to put that man on the front row into the heatest of the battles, to put him out there and to put him where he was at most at risk. As a matter of fact, I believe he told his generals to make sure he gets out there where he will be killed. And they put him out there, and sure enough, Bathsheba's husband was killed in battle. And David thought, well, everything is all right now. I've covered my tracks. I've covered my sins. But sure enough, let me tell you tonight, your sins will find you out. But he said, but it come to the point where David thought that he'd gotten taken everything control, and he thought he was living the way he thought he'd go back to living and doing the kingly duty. But God knew that David wasn't where he's supposed to be. And he sent a man. You know, sometimes God will send a man. God will send somebody in your life to straighten you out. Sometimes God will send another preacher into your church to hold revival that nobody else had ever gotten to you before. But the words that God given this man tickled your ears, and you listened, and you came and you gave your heart and soul to God. Let me tell you something tonight. If God needs to get your attention, He'll not only catch a bush on fire and not consume the bush, but He'll get to you the way He needs to. And David thought he had gotten away with his sins, and so he sent the prophet Nathan, and the prophet Nathan coming to David, and he gave him the story about the lamb and everything. And David said, oh, how much of a terrible man that is. And David said, well, that man is you. And he said, and there is the effects of sin upon your life. Do you know that? You may be a Christian, but there is effects of sin upon your life. The prophet Nathan told David, he said, howbeit, because this deed thou hast given great occasion to the enemies of the Lord to blaspheme. Let me tell you something. Because of David's sin, because of the lust, because he wasn't where he's supposed to be, he committed adultery, he committed fornication, fornication. He committed murder, and he lied. He does so many things. And Nathan, the prophet, said, you have caused our enemies to gain power because of what you did. The enemies of the Lord, you have given them occasion to blaspheme God. Let me tell you something. Your sin has consequences. Your sin will find you out. And every time that something happens and you slip back, there's always consequences. And Nathan said, the enemies of the Lord find occasion to blaspheme God because of your sin. Amen. There's consequences to sin. But you know what? That's a terrible, terrible picture to paint of what David did. But let me tell you something. Psalms 51, the very first verse says, have mercy. Have mercy on me, O God. Have mercy on me, O God. David went and he found out, and Nathan brought his sin to his attention. He said, God has brought me to you to allow you to know that your sins have found you out. He said, because you are a chosen one of God, you will not die, but your child will die. And it comes down to the point that David, he got to be repenting. I don't think he was repentant because of what Nathan said of his child. I don't think he was repentant because he was afraid that he may lose a battle in the army. But I believe that David was repentant. He was sorrowful because he had went against God. Because he said, have mercy on me, O God, according to thy loving kindness, according to the multitude of thy tender mercies. Let me tell you something tonight. David did a lot of bad things. David did a lot of things that the people do today. And he was forgiven. The very first thing he said was, have mercy on me, O God. And that's what we need to do. When we find ourselves in a situation, when we find ourselves slipping a little bit further than we should have, maybe we didn't turn our eye away from something we shouldn't have looked at, or maybe we went a little bit too far with the flirting with a co-worker. Maybe we did something, we just couldn't help ourselves from doing something. You know what? Their sin will find you out. But I'm glad to say today, when you finally get down to the way it is, and David looked down and he saw the sin. He saw what he did, and he said, have mercy upon me, O God, because he knew that he had a multitude of mercies. Have mercy upon me, O God. I recently read the book, The Pilgrim's Progress, that Jody Pasquarella, I believe it was, mentioned that everybody should read. And it is a good read, but it's hard. It's a hard read because it's written in like the old English or whatever. It's got a lot of these and thous, but you know, it's sort of like the Bible. But it's a story of a man named Christian who is on his pilgrimage progress. He gets a burden down, and he has this pack on his back that represents the burden of sin. He gets that relief from him on his trip. But you know, on his trip, he comes across a lot of different people giving him advice. Some people give him good advice, some people give him bad advice. And in the beginning he took both, good and bad. He didn't know which was which. But you know what? Once he got off the wrong way, once he took that bad advice, he knew better than to stay in that way. And he has asked the Lord, have mercy on me and bring me back. He'd go the right way. And finally you could read as his journey progressed how he started to get stronger in God. His journey started getting a more straighter down the path. And one time he come up to a gentleman, and the gentleman told him, he said, you know, the path that you need to take to get to your destination, it is a straight and narrow path. There'll be branches to the left, there'll be branches to the right, but all you have to do, Christian, is stay on the straight and narrow path. Let me tell you something today, Christian, all you have to do is stay on the straight and narrow path. Satan will try to bring us to the left. Satan will try to give us to the right. He'll try to get us off track. But all we got to do is stay on the straight and narrow path. Allow the Lord to guide you. Allow the Lord to guide you. Allow Him to leave the light on that you can see where you're going. Hey, Christian went on his progress to the Holy Land, that he come up to a big hill, and the road that he was on was the right way, and he looked and he said the straight and narrow path went straight up that hill, and as far as you could see, he said it looked rough, it looked hard, the road looked rough and hard, but he said there was two paths, one on the right side of the hill and one on the left side of the hill. They went around the hill. It looked like a whole lot easier path to take. Satan will paint a pretty picture of other paths that you should take. It looks a whole lot easier to go this way. You know why? We're not just going to ride into heaven taking the advice of other people, but we need to stay on the straight and narrow.